Thanks for watching Morning Live. Now, the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Service, or Sars, says that a huge revenue shortfall would be catastrophic for the country. Edward Kieswetter says that revenue could decline by as much as 20% this year. And he also says that the slow economy and the lockdown could cost South Africa up to 285 billion rand in tax revenue in 2020. The Commissioner joins us now. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Mr. Kieswetter. But I'm not sure how well SARS is doing at this point. But let's talk about the Revenue Service's projected and actual losses at the moment first.
So let me get to the projection first and then the actual losses. So the projections is modeled on, last week, you may remember Treasury modeled that our economy on the best scenario could contract by just over 5%. And at the worst scenario, it could contract by more than 16%. Our own range is very similar to that. And so we are saying is if the worst case scenario manifests, our revenue loss could be 20% of the printed estimate, and that's where the 285 billion comes from. What is our actual experience? In the first month, we have seen a significant early indication of that loss, So, for example, we said that pay as you earn was down by 5.2%. We've seen 65,000, just over 65,000 employers who last year made a contribution, did not make any contribution in April. And that is a sign of struggling economy. And that has a tax value of 3.8 billion. We've also seen just over 87,000 of our registered employees who last year also made payments, made a lower payment this year with a tax value of 6.1%. If I continue and talk about import taxes, that's down 20%. If I talk about excise duty, that's down by 54%. Now, it's early days, and the numbers are reflecting already a sign of a struggling economy. And so that's really where our concern comes from.
And just looking at the loss of economic capacity in the country, what sort of long-term tax revenue implications do you expect that to have on us, Edward?
So you're quite right to have picked up on the issue of capacity. We differentiate revenue from economic activities, but also which has a short-term impact, but we will then also talk about economic capacity. Now, what we mean is, when factories produce goods and services, that creates income and that creates tax. When you and I buy and consume goods and services, that creates consumption taxes, and that then funds government's programs. Now, when factories stop producing or customers stop buying, then for a brief period, that revenue ceases. The challenge is that many of those companies will close down and may not come back. The challenge is every job we lose will not be equally replaced. We already have a country with 10 million jobs, people unemployed. We could see that going up to 15, 16 or 17 million people unemployed in South Africa. So our real concern is beyond the short-term impact of under-recovery from revenue. It is about stating out there that we are also losing jobs, we are losing production capability, and to start a business once it is lost will be hard. Right now factories will say, yes, you can allow me to come back and produce, but I can't produce profitably at 50% capacity. Restaurants are saying, you can allow me to sell food, but I can't do so profitably. And so we have to understand that the broader impact on the economy is a loss of capacity, which clearly will be much harder to recover than simply the loss of economic activities.
And speaking to that, the job losses that are also projected to, depending on where you're looking, reach about 50%. What does that mean in terms of compliance at the moment and going forward? Because looking at people's socioeconomic conditions at the moment and this impact that this COVID lockdown has, are people likely to be less compliant?
Thank you for raising that. We've actually appealed to businesses and individuals to remain compliant. So let me just set out what compliance means. It means that when you're supposed to register for tax, that you in fact register. If you're supposed to make a declaration, some declarations are monthly, some declarations are twice a year, others are annually, then make those declarations when they are due. And then to the extent that you have to pay, make those payments. To the extent that you cannot make the payment, then the relief measure announced by government creates an opportunity for you to defer some of those payments without interest and penalties, but provided you engage SARS. If you take the law into your own hands, then it's much harder for us not to enforce the obligations that you have. So more than ever before, our appeal is for taxpayers to take care of their affairs, to make sure they are compliant. And in any case, all of the relief measures that government has announced only applies to compliant taxpayers.
And then hogging the headlines of late, Edward, has been that SARS has apparently lost about 1.5 billion rand in April alone due to the ban on the sale of tobacco, cigarettes and alcohol. Talk to us about that and why this in particular you would think is hogging the headlines as opposed to a general assessment of the loss of revenue.
I think it hogs the headlines because there are so many desperate smokers and drinkers out there that have run out of supplies. Understandably so. We have not entered the fray of value judgment on the actual decision. My day job is to collect revenue. And so when I speak, it is about the impact of the decision on revenue. And so the revenue impact we said for the first month was 1.7 billion, offset by a recovery in some fuel. So that's relatively small in the context of our total revenue. Our real concern that we raise is right now you can go out and you can buy cigarettes, you can buy alcohol, but you'll buy it on the parallel economy. You pay a lot more for it. And so we have been struggling in South Africa for many years to deal with the parallel economy that is syndicated by crime and illicit activities. And we've simply raised the flag that an unintended consequence of the ban on sale of cigarettes and alcohol is just giving the so-called illicit economy too much airtime than that we deserve. And they are establishing a client base, which again just breeds criminal activity that we're already struggling with in South Africa.
So have you consulted government about this and the impact of this ban in particular? And what actual evidence do you have as SARS at this time regarding illicit trading or the so-called black market on cigarettes and alcohol?
Well, so yes, yesterday in the parliamentary committee, we raised this as a serious concern. We share this to the decision makers. I had a conversation yesterday with some of the ministers who are involved in managing the economic decisions to open up the economy. And so we share these concerns. What evidence do we have? Well, we have made through our customs and also our illicit economic capability that we have set up, we have made over 40 detentions and we have made 17 seizures. And this would not only include alcohol and tobacco, but it also includes other goods like illicit clothing and textiles and shoes. We are currently dealing with 4 specific cases of tobacco and alcohol with the South African Police Services where we are considering laying charges. So we are aware of these activities. And then if you go down the streets, on Sunday, for example, I came across someone who I said to him, my friend, can you tell me where you get your cigarettes from? And he says, I can give you one. I said, no, I actually want to go and buy some cigarettes. And he said to me, well, if you go down the road here, there's a garage there. There's a guy, if you speak to him, you can buy cigarettes. But I hear that from family in Cape Town, that they have become aware that you can buy cigarettes and alcohol. You'll pay a lot more for it, and it certainly won't go through the tax system.
Looking purely at the financial side of this for the moment and setting aside very important issues of health, hospital readiness, etc., if government were to unban these products, that would be cigarettes, tobacco and alcohol, what would that mean for SARS financially? Would it make enough of a financial impact at this stage to actually cushion us somewhat for the foreseeable future?
Well, we're living in a time where every rand of revenue matters. We know that at the moment there are additional expense burdens on government in terms of the relief, the additional payment to social grant recipients, the additional COVID relief to unemployed individuals. And then there's also the 70 billion worth of tax cost for the tax relief measures. And then our health costs that will go up. So what we are saying is, in a time when more than ever before government needs revenue, every rand matters. And so we don't take a moral position necessarily of the impact of smoking and drinking, otherwise we would never collect the taxes. We simply come at it as an impact on revenue. Hence, we will continually flag, not just on alcohol and tobacco for that matter. I think that has been sensationalized for the reasons I've shared before. Our real concern is we need to be very, very conscious of the lockdown decisions and the phased opening of the economy, because it will not only have a short-term revenue impact, it will have a long-term revenue impact when we start losing jobs that we cannot replace, and when some of these factories and businesses start going out of business, though that is an economic capacity that may be lost forever.
Kieswetter, can I please ask you to please just hold the line for us? Please stay there. I have 2 or 3 more questions that I'd like to put to you, but we are into news time. So, with the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Service, or SARS, Kieswetter, and we're talking about the projected shortfall as a result of the catastrophic COVID-19 pandemic. Thanks so much for staying with us, Edward. So just looking at what's happening to businesses, and obviously we've spoken to this a little bit, but many are asking at this stage, both businesses and individuals, whether there would be some sort of policy shift at SARS, whether SARS would actually give more relief during this lockdown?
Sakina, we don't make the decision on whether or not to give relief. That is made primarily by the Minister in consultation with our colleagues in Treasury and ourselves. And so what additional relief will be made will be announced when and as it is formulated. But we've already announced a significant number of relief measures that SARS obviously had to configure our systems in order to administer it. Our appeal to taxpayers is to remain compliant. And the relief is not for your filing obligation. The relief relates to payment obligations in the form of deferrals. And the reason why that is the case is to provide cash flow in the businesses in order to retain jobs, not to pay dividends or to do some profiteering. It is really to make sure that there's enough money during this time when businesses are not fully operational in order to that they may be able to keep people employed for as long as possible. Our approach is consistent. We administer the law. We do that with empathy. We will always try and make it easy for honest taxpayers to comply. But we don't have any discretion in as far as shifting the tax burden, in a way that we think is in sympathy with the situation on the ground. If that was the mandate of the Commissioner, we would have problems, because I feel sorry for people very quickly.
And I think many individuals and businesses are thinking, oh, well, perhaps we should have you making those decisions. But, coming back to the reality of it, and we are seeing businesses in droves, declaring that they are in distress. And just looking at that particular situation, what sort of insights is SARS able to gain from that sort of micro data that is firm specific?
So we shared with you, for example, that we get on pay as you earn, we get submissions at an employer level, and that gives us detail at an individual level. So we know, for example, heading into COVID-19, we had higher than usual retrenchments just for the month of April. We reported a 10% increase in retrenchments, a total number of 20,000 people retrenched just in the month of April. We also know that firms have not given bonuses as they have previously, that dividends weren't declared and paid. So a lot of cash stayed out of the disposable portion of income, and therefore it was not taxable. We saw that heading into it. In addition to that, we've also, in consultation and in discussion with my colleague Rusenga Maluleka, who is the Statistician General, they did a survey, and from their survey, they have seen 20% of businesses already laid off staff. About half of businesses says they're not sure if they're going to survive beyond 3 months. About 38% of businesses feel that they will lay off staff in the next 3 months. And so we are beginning to pick up the anecdotal evidence from the economy that businesses who close down now will not, many of them will not come back, and jobs that are lost now will not easily be replaced. I mentioned earlier on we have about 10 million unemployed South Africans. We are likely to see that go up by probably 50 to 60%, which means that we could end up with an employment level of 16 million people in South Africa. Now, apart from the sad impact on the lives of those families, and if you add the multiplier effect, one job on average feeds 5 people. You're talking of close on to 16 million unemployed affects many more individuals who are without income, many more businesses that will not operate. And so what we raise basically is that it makes our mandate to collect taxes just so much harder at a time when more than ever before government needs the income.
And, perhaps if you could just apply your mind to this as the Commissioner in both short and long-term forecasts, how do you foresee us coming out of this, and how does the economy begin to recover, especially from a revenue perspective from this COVID-19?
I think if you step back for a minute, Sakina, what are we trying to achieve? On the one hand, we are trying to manage the health and mortality outcomes. We are not going to stop the spread of the virus. At best, we can slow down the peak, the rate of infection, and we can ensure that the coincidence of our flu season impact, which is now in winter, is not when we also peak with coronavirus transmissions. So the health strategy is to defer the peak to the end of August or early September. So that's on the one hand what we're trying to do. We cannot stop the spread of the virus until there's a vaccine. In parallel with that, or in tension with that, is allowing economic activities in a phased approach to come back. I think we can do better at that, because that means we have to resort to evidence-based, risk-based modeling. And we are currently, I am part of a small group where we are trying to strengthen our capability to model, taking into account, on the one hand, the health outcomes, but on the other hand, also the impact on the economy, so that we find the most optimal point to manage these tensions. And by the way, it's not just economic activities, it is also social activities. We have to be concerned about the long-term psychosocial impact on society. We have to be concerned about the emotional and spiritual well-being of people. It's not just about putting food and water on the table. Man shall not live by bread alone, the good book says. So we also have to make sure that the trauma that lockdown and the trauma that the fear of either dying from the virus or the fear of dying from hunger, that we are also mindful and very close to our people. So I speak now not as a SARS commissioner, I speak as an ordinary South African, but one who also thinks deeply about how we can manage this. And I do think We are on an accelerated learning curve. We are in constant conversation with the decision makers to make sure that we never become arrogant and think that we have worked out a perfect recipe. At times like this, you must remain humble, you must be open to new ideas, you must review your plans continuously, and in an agile way respond as this situation evolves. We cannot sit here and say we understand everything about the virus, and therefore we also cannot say that our plans are perfect. And South Africans, we have to be patient as we learn, but continue to put the pressure on those who make the decisions, because we have to be open and responsive to what's actually happening in the economy.
Well, thank you so much for your time this morning. Kieswetter is the Sars Commissioner talking to us about this year's revenue and the economy. And with that, we're going to take a break.